Great. And we were talking with Unai a little bit that I can maybe facilitate the discussion a little bit. We're we're expecting that some of you maybe have read the paper and some of you not. But the best thing might be that we go through it, like what it's saying and what we are trying to say, and also maybe contextualize it a little bit based on the 6 short sections that there is. Hey, one thing, by the way, I could show you the background. Of course, is the book Protocols for Post-Capitalist Expression. We released. Basically, it's the economic white paper in a book form. It became a little bit long. So we put it out also as in a book form, and it is kind of I think a serious attempt at situating what we do in the history of economic and political thinking, and trying to push economics into the network era, and opening it to the politics, and kind of what we are now working on, and specifying is then these protocols, and what we've written is kind of it's best understood in this context of the project too. So the paper is called Beyond Monetary Profit: Reclaiming Economic Calculation. I was thinking, Jorge, by the way, that today that we should have put it like Reclaiming Economic Computation. Principles for utility-centric financial grammar, or principles for self-defined value-centric financial grammar. Anyway, there were options on the table for the title, and it has like 6 short sections. And I was thinking that let's talk through them one by one in a discussion format, if possible. So maybe I will start by saying this. So let's go the sections first. So the first section is like introduction. There we kind of try to introduce the thesis that we have, which is, to summarize maybe already, is that all economic processes are fundamentally computations. And that's kind of where we are coming from, and when they are computations, they're guided by a certain set of rules and protocols, which also define the kind of agency available, like the economic agency within this kind of computation. So that's where we're coming from. Then the second section is we are like there trying to deconstruct the capitalist or capital-centric economic computation, like what is it made of, how does it work, and what are its limitations or restrictions. Then the section 3 is, and now we are kind of starting to move to the beef or the meat, tofu of the paper, which is that how could economic organizations measure and articulate value in their own terms. Like if we are criticizing the existing economic computations is not enough, but we actually need to create the different or alternative ways to do economic computation. And we are there starting to lay out the groundwork for that, or kind of what questions need to be answered if we want to actually make a serious effort in this space, in this area. And then the section 4 goes further. What are these further key components of this alternative or different economic computation? And then section 5 is even further. How can flows be managed? These value flows be managed in different way, not relying on markets, but there can be different ways of different protocols for that too. And then the section 6, the last section, is about, or the last point we're trying to make is that we actually need to think about the interfacing too, that there are there's a necessity to have a bridge that creates this interface between this alternative or different economic computation and the existing market computations, and what are the reasons for that. So that's kind of for the arc of this short paper, or the dramaturgy that we created for it. So that's it. Let's go start with the section 1. I was thinking like maybe 5 minutes per section, so it's like half an hour or so. So the first section, that the existing economic computation is limited. Kind of what do we need to understand to make sense of that statement? Kind of and first of all, that there is such a thing, that economic computation. What do we mean by that?
Okay, so those are two different questions. But yeah, how I would put it, for instance, Charlie, given what you described, is that we know that accounting is very clearly a formal calculation practice, and one that importantly is net worth. What I would say that the a way of understanding economic computation first and foremost is as a net worth computation. We can agree that accounting itself as a practice is a network computation practice, and therefore a formal protocol, even if it has not been called out as such. It's very clearly, at least from my perspective, a formal protocol. And as a protocol, it has like two dimensions. It has the social dimensions. Is a multi-tier contract, and it's a formal contract. And on the other hand, it's also it has a logic. It has certain logical bounds of what it does it for. And as such, the protocol, as a protocol, accounting, the set of practice delimits a space of computation, which is basically a state transition space of the network, which is a formal say of it delimits what's possible. So that's how I would put it. So it has certain bounds, as all protocols do. Even if you go all the way to formal methods, you could even like measure the possibility space very concretely. So just to give that really like ground down what we mean by economic computation, that it's not just a metaphor.
Yeah.
We're saying, hey, all of economy runs on spreadsheets. It's just basically an accounting software. This is where it is at, and we need to call out those practices as formal protocols that first and foremost are artifacts, and they are not just natural. They work because they have been time tested and proved over time. So it's no easy task to create an alternative, or alternative network forms of network calculation. But the first step towards that is calling out intervention points, which is what we're saying, like finance, and finance is predicated on accounting, so really I think it's accounting. And second, once understood why it works. Because it's, from my perspective as a protocol designer, it's like I really find it like beautiful with all the critiques that capitalism receives as a network protocol. It's like very impressive, and sort of trying to understand it and then creating alternatives. Like, okay, where are the intervention points that we can, what practices we can change, and how. That answer the question, actually?
Yes. I was I was thinking, asking Charlie, that did that make sense to him? Yeah, great. Then
Jorge,
go ahead.
can I ask a question just to give
Mhm.
context? So you're describing the capitalist system. Does this accounting space also describe your post-capitalist vision?
So
Maybe not the same
accounting is
accounting, but
correct. Absolutely. So now we're getting like protocol and to language, right? Accounting itself as a practice, as keeping records and creating sort of like ways of articulating those records, like valuation, metrics, all this kind of thing, that is actually a language that is way more expansive than capitalism. We can call out, like for instance, the equation of capital equals assets minus liabilities, one of the core invariants of capitalism. Sometimes it's equity equals assets minus liabilities. It's itself an accounting equation, but it's not the only one possible. There's many kinds of invariants or equations that could be implemented to sort of also bringing like conservation laws or resource sensitive calculations, of which again that one in capital is one. So to your point, is like accounting as a language is much more expansive than capitalism itself, even though we use it or a particular subset and then sort of like ossify in a way. It's a protocol, and that's what protocols do. Protocols get fixed and really hard to change. And yeah, we can sort of like by calling that out, we discover that it's a much more expressive language to implement different kind of financial logics, different kinds of methods of commensuration, etc.
great. So it's underpinning the methodology that you guys are utilizing going forward.
Absolutely. And even lower, as we were talking the other day, Lian, that underlying accounting lies actually a very elegant distributed computation architecture. It's been embedded or implicit in there. So it goes even beyond what people think it's accounting. The way I'm understanding is distributed computation that is actually trying to preserve a consistent state in the network. But that's just to hint that there's layers to understanding this, economic artifact.
Yeah. I think you're touching a really good point, which I also want to emphasize here in the section 1. I don't know if Lian, did you join there? Kind of where we were thinking that let's go section by section.
I did. I'm on my phone, and now my computer obviously doesn't have enough space on it to work.
Okay. Anyway, but Jorge, you were touching or kind of hinting at a very important point, which was that you were saying that it's kind of beautiful, elegant, or kind of what we've been spending quite a lot of time in analyzing too, is that why is it so successful? Why has it worked so well, and why does it seem that that's the only way? Which is kind of one of the big challenges, that when people are taking it as such a naturalized or self-evident thing, like how can you even start creating fractures or a way to something else? And one of those things is that, like you were saying, that it is really a kind of efficient, distributed accounting system. It works, and it allows interoperability. There are all of these things, and to challenge that, it's a challenging task. But kind of this is the other context item, or kind of important to understand I think in the introduction section. So where we are coming from is that we are saying that, in fact, the new networked computational substrates actually allow also other kinds of distributed value computations or economic computations. So we are now, thanks to this new substrate, in a position to actually challenge or express also different economic computations, because, and this is the third point in the intro section, is that from our perspective, it is becoming clear that this existing economic computation, as kind of elegant it is, it has served its purpose, and now it's kind of passé, or its expressive power is exhausted. It cannot articulate or understand some of the more complex and networked value networks that are kind of already our reality.
To expand on that just a little bit, actually, and to the point of just skimming again over the section, I think an important point is, like, for instance, what it says, like, the language, the grammar, the formal categories of this accounting system are a way of mapping reality, and it limits what it can be mapped. It limits what it can see or it can sense. So as a form of mediation, as a social contract, this system see a very limited reality, and therefore a very limited landscape of value. So because these categories define not only how things are valued, but what things are subject to valuation. And as you were putting in there, like, it comes from an industrial era where things were the objects of valuation. And we've shifted long time ago into well, it's arguably it's always been like that, but now primarily and even economically, the fundamental value form is not an object, it's a relation. It cannot compute that. So it's about exploring how is it that we can create different, as you say, like, economic calculations that are tailored to measuring relationships. And just to make it very concrete, I'll give you an example of an economic computation, arguably economic, a distributed computation that is about valuing the relationship. And I don't know if you're familiar with Google's PageRank, which is the algorithm that it's underpinning the success of Google. It's called eigenvector centrality, and it's basically a network calculation, and it measures, it values the influence of all the of nodes in the network based in relationship. So that is an economic calculation influence, but it's an entirely different algorithm to, like, price taking and position taking in the market, for instance, which would be another kind of algorithm, just to ground it a little bit in more precise examples.
Can I just point out something that strikes me as an economist? You're emphasizing accounting and this protocol, and you're emphasizing quantitative measurement, but you're also talking about adding qualitative measurement. But the accounting, like, for me, in my world and in my vision of the world, I very much appreciate an accounting context. But when you start talking about utility, for economists, utility is always something that's not measurable. It's ordinal. It's in relationships, and then you start sticking it into some utility function, and you get these mathematical, spaces. But it's not accounting. Like, it's the opposite of accounting. So I whenever you use the word utility in your documents, I always wonder where you're going to go with that. Like,
as I was reading it, I had that same, or like a very similar question or concern as well, actually.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and well, Dick is not here. He's sleeping in Australia, hopefully sleeping. So he couldn't come, and this has been a point of serious discussion, that is the utility the right word here. We've used also self-defined value, but we have now recently shifted, or we're testing also kind of, does it work as a concept, as a word, the utility. It is not the subjective utility from what we are familiar with from your mainstream economics, but we are kind of giving it a different take. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we actually do this with quite a lot of concepts, also balloons. kind of where we try to like reappropriate some of the meanings of the words. For instance, the word economy is kind of appropriated by capitalism, and like this is the only way to understand what economy is and how it works. And we are kind of to say that we're trying to like take that word, that concept, and give it a little bit expanded meaning, like massage it in a different way, and which is kind of a practice for us. But it's a good question and fair question. We think it works because it points to something very concrete, something usable, and it's also kind of used in the crypto context too, especially in the decentralized infrastructure projects which are kind of which we've been analyzing, and we like them as a kind of where they're going. They're kind of actually creating a concrete usable utility which is desirable outside the network too. And we think that that's the direction which needs to be introduced to this collaborative finance effort too, so that it's not only about money or credit but also actual production.
So it's tied to
Jorge?
use value.
Yeah.
Is it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
No, yeah. And something else I will add, Diana, and you tell me what you think. I've been talking with Dick extensively about this. Because yeah, we want, as Axel says, right? Like on one hand, the crypto discourse has already like a very specific meaning of this, and the mainstream economic discourse. There's, depending who you speak,
Utility
what
tokens,
it means. What is clear, Lian, is that there's no consensus. Like I spent like a few weeks researching just the evolution of utility and attempts at measurement. So it feels like a fertile ground to say like, and this is what we think utility is. It's not that there's any consensus anyway of what it is. But what a common theme that all of these sort of what I felt was the underlying answer or question that drives this concept is what drives the participants in a protocol towards certain decisions. And that is what I thought, and I've been advocating very strongly to adopt that term with ECSA, because there's in economics there is this literal run like a utility function, which is usually just a black box. We don't know why, but there's some sort of logic. And in the corporation, the utility function is the profit-seeking optimization, right? The profit maximization.
And it's different for each person.
Say that again?
It's different for each person. Like for the economist, utility is not comparable. So I could be maximizing my utility, not be going for profit. I could be helping the world.
Yeah, I understand, but
I think. Yeah.
sorry, I interrupted you. You're breaking a little bit. So, am I?
Oh, sorry. I'll stop talking.
Breaking? No. Is it me or is breaking for everyone?
Yeah. No. She was.
I was hearing a little cutting in and out.
Okay, so
Okay. I hear you clearly, Jorge.
Okay. Okay, so you were saying what I heard you say that in mainstream economics, utility is relevant to people basically with subjectivity and not necessarily utilized in the context of a corporation.
Yes, and not in my mind the same as use value. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So she was saying,
if you're using use value, it's fine.
Yeah, I'll repeat what she was saying was that, or what she meant was that kind of in economics, the utility is not comparable; they're subjective. So use value, it's something different, and that's okay as a direction. I think. Yeah, she meant.
Yeah, but just to say like why I find this very useful is because on one hand we are envisioning first of all, if we have a richer economy or a richer economic grammar, that also means more complexity, that we do not expect the user to absorb, but we've been talking about these agents that sort of mediate. But then we need to formalize what drives the behavior of those agents. And that's the place where we say, hey, we can have a utility function as this abstract computational space in which decisions are taken into which economic or financial position to take according to which strategies or which optimization functions, where the optimization function doesn't have to be like the most commonly known agent, the corporation, doesn't have to be profit maximization. It can be an optimization across multiple dimensions of value, across multiple forms of measurement, but still computational, still formal. I mean, one of the reasons accounting with money works is because everyone intuitively knows basic arithmetic, and that's what accounting capital and calculating profit is. It's just a basic this minus that, and everyone has that sense. The heuristic is that more is better, less is worse. It's a very simple user interface, but at scale, we can see that the effect that it has, right? That the thing has to constantly be grown and generate a profit and all that. So it's like, okay, if we want a more sophisticated system, we need to do things, make it richer in its expression, but also as simple at the user interface. But that requires us to formalize the economic agent at the end, the edge, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, yes, very good. Now, let's move on to basically we were covering already the second section, the like deconstructing the prevailing grammar, going through it, like what I was saying, that maybe what if we understand money only as a like a protocol artifact? That's kind of starts to open the perspective. What if market price is just one valuation mechanism, but there can be other ones? What if market is just one resource allocation protocol, but there can be other ones of protocol defined allocation mechanisms? So this is kind of where we're getting in the section 2, and we are saying that with the emerging computational substrate, this is exactly what is becoming possible. We can actually put these things in perspective, or there's this new, a layer below is opening up, a space below is opening up, and which allows us to design different protocols. Yes? Okay, section 2, done. Section 3 then. Jorge, now we're moving to our proposal a little bit. So what is important? What questions does an alternative or different economic calculation then need to answer for if it's to take a serious if we are going to take it seriously?
So I'm not sure if I can say better than what the text said.
Okay, let's read it from there. Can you read it?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have it?
Yeah. So I'll read it. If capital's prevailing grammar constrains our ability to cultivate or calculate also a broader value spectrum, particularly those values ill-suited to its categories, then a fundamental reevaluation of its core accounting conventions becomes necessary. How might economic organizations articulate and measure value on their own terms? How can this be done in a way that respects the intrinsic nature of the value being generated, without defaulting to a universal monetary metric? This requires a capacity for endogenous value definition. A very simple example, which is maybe not the common example on the left, but for me very present, is monetizing the platform to advertisement, right? Like you have, and then the algorithm becomes, instead of maximizing what makes the utility of the network, instead of maximizing that utility, then start seeking the engagement metric, because engagement is directly translatable to dollars, right? So that is a way of like coercing the utility, the value, into monetary metrics. And so it needs to sort of collapse all of that value into a valuation framework that prioritize a utility function that serves the profit maximization. Which algorithms, in my opinion, are like the so-cited algorithms, like YouTube algorithm or Facebook algorithm, they are utility functions for me very clearly in this course.
Yes. So, but let's continue. So, what are the necessary elements, or what are the questions that need to be answered if you continue reading? Because then we get to the okay.
Yeah. This leads to the concept of a network self-defined overall performance. Such performance will be articulated through relevant, measurable dimensions, quantitative outputs, qualitative states, like the vibrancy of acknowledged commons, and processual achievements reflecting its unique context and priorities. Yet, a dashboard of indicators is insufficient for a coherent economic calculus. So it's not about big data only. An internal means of commiseration is indispensable, and this connects to the accounting.
Yes, this is the point number one. Yes, we need it.
This points to the necessity of an endogenous unit of utility. This is how it starts touching the accounting with this unit of utility. A non-monetary numeraire. Such a unit will be a quantifiable representation of access to or benefit from the network's primary utility offering, whether it's education or whether it's entertainment or whether it's whatever abstract value the network, inclusive of platforms but not limited to, will be offering. It will be concretely defined by the network itself. For example, one standard housing day, 1 gigabyte of processed data. Each unit of utility could then become the network's internal standard of account, grounding the valuation of contributions, the denomination of access rights, and the calculation of surplus in its direct command over specific use values. These also enable the formal recognition of qualitative yield. This is where enhancements in the quality or scope of the utility means that existing claims on that utility gain in experimental value are dynamic, poorly captured by purely quantitative monetary system. So an example of that would be like, let's say the network, I have a, I don't know, like a network access credit that gives me access to the network, but as the network improves, it gets faster. So speed would be like a qualitative dimension of the network, and still my credit still buys me the same amount of access per day, but what it still is faster, so it increases, and this is hints to the qualitative yield. So it's basically trying to say, hey, there's not only a surplus that can be created by participating and developing a network, that it's about it producing more money. It actually can, the utility function can start producing other yields across time. So it's hinting also different utility function, basically, or what information this utility function would be utilizing.
Yes.
And that
So
leads to the next chapter about the
So-
surplus or the section.
Oh, hey, here. So you're imagining that there are numeraires, there are units of account, maybe many,
Yes.
or are they? Is there one standard in this?
No. It can,
No. So
it's a type. It's a type. The unit of utility is not a
in
unit
a network,
thing. It's just like it's a category. It's an accounting category.
So I'm focused on this non-monetary numeraire. So there is a numeraire, but it's non-monetary in the sense that it is not a medium of exchange, but it is a unit of account. But there may be multiple, or is there a standard where you can compare this, I don't know, different outcomes with others? Well, obviously there would be numeraires there, but are there some that are not reducible to one numeraire? As because when you emphasize a monetary numeraire, you're sort of talking about, like, you're not talking about multiple multiple currencies. Like, Bernard Lietaer, when he talks about community currencies, and he says there has to be pluralism and we need many, many, many different currencies. Like, there's that vision, and many, many different monies. But in this critique, you're focused on, well, we're critiquing the capitalist world, which has one, basically, where there's one money, and that is the money that monetizes all the stocks and flows, and that's used as the numeraire. And now we're going to come in with this other perspective, which is still using numeraires, correct? But that there's many of them, and they're not necessarily also a medium of exchange.
Not in the universal sense. They have exchangeability and measurability and accounting and commensurability relative to the context of this particular utility. And it's basically the direct result of the reason why capitalism, capitalist accounting can be simple, or the direct consequence of its simplicity is its necessary collapse. And that means erasing a bunch of information and finding a path towards this making it compatible with that particular form of commensuration. If we want a non-collapse, that means not compressing the wealth of information. And to do that, the only way, in all these years that we've been talking about these conversations with the only way that I've really found out is by having a diversity of these units, each one, because they don't exist by themselves. Each one is defined in reference and a bunch of different calculative practice. Like, for instance, eigenvector centrality, the unit of account is centrality score. Right?
Yes.
The number makes only sense in context of all the computations that were taken into account for that. So if we want to preserve all the economic computation without collapse, the only way is saying this is the so-and-so network protocol, which in economic discourse, I'm trying to, again, the utility function. To say this is the utility function. This utility function is a distributed algorithm that measures in this unit. So the calculation and the unit are not separatable from each other. And this unit has commensuration, exchangeability within the context of this utility, this protocol. So it's about recognizing that different networks produce different values. Therefore, they have different accountings, and therefore they have different units. There's the recognition, the tacit recognition, that they might be imagining or trying to think that there could be one unit. It already computationally implies the collapse into one logic. One comes into with the other. So there cannot be a universal thing and then that doesn't collapse. It's almost like logically inconsistent to that statement.
Well, so does it mean that you have to remove markets because the market is going to collapse it? But so you're removing the markets and market prices, which allows your heterogeneity in.
We will talk about that later into interfaces, because moving is not the only necessary. Interfacing, that would be the right way. But we will get
so like market is one way is interface, but really good question to the heart of it, Leanne. So and like Hora was saying, so if we are really taking a serious take on this economic computation, it needs to be coherent economic computation, which needs this unit of account there, and endogenous unit of utility, and then you were going already to the next section, which basically it grounds the valuations of the contributions within that network also. And this is kind of what the next section says, that there can be different contributions towards the increasing of the capacity of the network, which is then rewarded by stake, and then utility credits, another kind of contribution reward in the network, also in terms of this unit, and kind of that is how it starts to become a coherent calculation. These are the elements. So when I was asking the question, like, what are the questions that need to be answered? These are exactly the questions that we think that any series of effort on this needs to be able to somehow answer.
It seems to me that if you're in the next section, if you're creating this stake and these tokens and these valuations, then are we imagining tokens that are not exchangeable? That are tokens that are allocated and people have they're non-transferable tokens. So that
I was going to say that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes.
Non-transferable.
Then tokens. Yes, but
yeah,
instruments.
But I qualify the market sense, and that's important because market is a transfer protocol. Basically, what you're doing is setting a set of logics that say, how is it that this changes hands from this to that? So on one hand, these tokens are fungible, right? So they can add up to, and they can be subtracted. So which basically hints already as their transferability. But then how these get converted into the other, through which medium, through what logics, that's a whole different space. It doesn't have to be markets. So we're trying to leave that open as, hey, there's different algorithms in which like that can do that, right? So a very simple transfer protocol that is already well known, that is not necessarily purely markets, will be like international trade with a tariff. Right? It's not like it's just a market. There's a tariff, there's a cut, there's a government. It needs to, only certain things go through that interface. So that's already a validation. But of course, there can be different protocols for value transfer that may have like way more complex logic than just bid ask a highest bidder, high priority. So which is the or the book filling that you've pointed to before, which is itself a transfer protocol. So we're talking about this value flow protocol, which is flow management beyond markets. So it's the next one. But what I would like us to talk about right now is surplus and the discipline, because there's many things of why the current accounting works that if we don't implement it, we'll just have a non-functional aspirational commune.
Yeah, like
right?
much in the crypto space, for instance. Yes.
Yeah. So there's again, one of the reasons why capitals accounting works is not necessarily because of the monetary or the transferability. No, because it has a discipline. It has a resource sensitivity, and it's very simple. If we say economic computations is about computing value transfer and value creation, it's about converting inputs into outputs. That's a part of what it computes. You cannot produce outputs out of thin air. There's some sort of transformation of inputs into outputs. And one of the sort of premises of that is that you cannot have, if you want the self-reproduction of an economic entity, the outputs need to be in excess of the inputs, or at least the same. Otherwise, it doesn't. If it's less, it just it dies. Basically, it has to have some sort of mechanism that guides the utility function into at least preserving. But then to do that calculation, you need some form of internal commensuration, right? Like, how do you know what's more, what's less? So this hints into the surplus, right? You need to define what is it that the network creates, and this is why the utility function is so important. Okay, the network does this. The purpose is to create this thing. The performance is to create this thing, to provide this utility, to provide this benefit. And whenever an economic transaction is performed, goes toward the production of this surplus, this transformation of inputs into outputs. And you cannot reward the inputs in those exchanges, because there are exchanges, although it's not market exchange, for the contributions for the outputs in excess of what it adds to the network. I'll give you an example. Let's talk about an energy grid, which is very simple and nice example, right? So let's say that we have this capitalist energy grid that the utility is to produce green energy. So green is a qualitative dimension that can be measured, like how green in terms of like ecological impact, or like the mix of different, whether it's wind or solar, the ground impact, in which kind of land is used. There are all these qualitative metrics, right? And then you have kilowatt hour, which is a very easily quantifiable output. So in this particular example, if I bring in a contribution, let's say a battery, then that battery will add the infrastructure certain capacity to store this energy and provide energy in excess in order to provide another quantifiable metric, which is resilience, right? So overall, all the generators, all the batteries, they cannot produce more energy than what it physically produces. So whenever I add a battery into the grid, what I get rewarded with is utility credits, which in this case will be like green kilowatt hours, cannot be in excess of what I am contributing, or what the network is producing. So internally, there will have to be some sort of calculation that respects this resource conservation requirements, right? Which again, that's what capitalism have. But instead of saying, hey, the resource conservation is that the costs should not increase the revenue, we're saying, hey, well, in this network for energy, cost is energy, revenue is energy. So it's doing a calculation that is particularly tailored for energy, and it doesn't need to go back into the cost minus revenue at this internal level of the interface, which of course, if we want to interface with markets, we will need some sort of conversion, but it doesn't have to be already embedded in the network's logic, like in a corporation, for instance.
So really well explained. Thanks, Jorge. So that's kind of pointing to the kind of also one of the background thesis. We talk about like fundamental value, or the value theory of performance, which is kind of a fundamental take on this, which is very different to the what you have in the fiat currency issuance world, but also in the blockchain world, where kind of the issuance is just predetermined by certain usually by certain algorithm, and that's the way it goes. Here we are saying that the issuance needs to be disciplined financially by this like the production of the utility, and that's kind of how we anchor it into the real production, or we think that it should be done. Okay, or Blian, how did that sound? Otherwise, let's move to the last section.
Go ahead. Yep, that's good.
So,
You hear me,
the
right?
Which is the
other thing actually that we just need to say, and this is part of the design space too, although we are proposing that this is as what already starts going into post-capitalism, is that you can actually measure or reward differently different financial sort of benefits you get. Like we're saying there's two categories of contributions. There's things that are just inputs that are consuming the production of the output, but then there's more operating operative contributions, like for instance a solar cell in the case of the grid, right? So maybe the solar cell receives stake, but the energy, there are two values that are being added in the framework that solar cell produces is rewarded with credits. And what's important about this is that we want to redefine the concept of ownership and access. So it's a stake is basically owning, sharing in on the owning, and therefore the cost, the maintenance cost, the risk associated to that owning, and the creation of that which is being owned with others in the network. And that confers responsibility, but also governance. And then there's credits, which is benefiting from. So it's also defining through that this definition of what is the resource sensitivity, the inputs, the outputs, and therefore where is a surplus. The surplus becomes like the distribution, right? Like surplus energy will be like, okay, I own the network, then every month I get dividends in terms of like electricity, and that I don't get the money, I get the utility, I access to that electricity in certain amount commensurate the surplus, which again was measured in this endogenous unit of liquidity. So that's also the thing that we're trying to separate ownership from access, which is analogous to equity and capital from money, right? So
Which is
that's
very useful.
Yeah.
Also kind of that, and again, like one of our classic moves we're trying to make is that we see a structure like of equity, but we generalize it for also for other to do other things, which allows us to design the exactly what Haro was saying, like the question of ownership.
But also maintain interoperability, which is why the abstraction is so powerful. The generalization is so powerful because it allows you a path to interoperate.
Yes. Okay. And then, so that was the still in the section 4, and then basically the last section and 5. The section 5 is about that we can like what we've been hinting at now many times, that these flows, as described just earlier, this can be managed by a different logic than a market, as which is just one transfer protocol, like Haro was saying. And then the last section, which is really important for us, and much of our recent work has been concentrating on this, is the interface, or that we actually understood that we need to separate or create this interface or bridge between these two economic computations, because otherwise we need to protect the other one, especially in the beginning. Now, I forgot what I was going to say about this. Should we read?
Are we skipping the flow management beyond markets, because that speaks to something that Leanne was referring to earlier?
Yeah, I was thinking that we already talked quite a lot about it, but do you want to say something specifically?
It's just like what I like about that section is doesn't they say exactly how, but it opens the questions that need to be answered to come up with different hows. Because
okay. What are the questions? Well, the issuance control, the redemption management, the allocation.
Correct. You need to define how you value, number one, the contributions, what amounts by which, but following this discipline that is resource sensitive. The second one is how do you therefore, as a consequence, how you calculate the surplus, the dividend. Also, how do you regulate the redemption process, right? Because it would change for different kinds of utility, and it doesn't have to be a market. In fact, that for those that come from the competition discourse, is like one of the things there's the most algorithms about is like a queue management algorithm. So markets are really a queue management algorithm, a distributed queue management algorithm. In this case, managing transfers. And if we understand this, that networks and markets are network protocols for queue management, then the question is, what kind of other queue management protocols can we have? Like it could be pacing, buffering, like all these kind of things that already are well known in the discourse of networking, in order to regulate the queues that don't have to be highest bidder, for instance. And it does opens a much larger design space, but however, they need to be formalized and they need to follow a discipline, which is again like what capitalism gets right with markets plus profit, right? Like it's and the calculation of a surplus. Therefore, it's this discipline and this distribution logic. So I would just put in there like those an alternative design would need to answer those questions for a specific utility. But there's no general design. It's just a general abstraction for very specific designs.
So Jorge, you're
Yes.
removing the highest bidder from dominating the system. It's always going to be. Yeah. Okay.
It's more than removing, it's calling it out as one protocol, because you might have certain utilities where there's definitely going to be a resource sensitivity and therefore a supply demand. But you may resolve it in different ways to highest bidder. And as I was saying before, already within capitalism, there's many ways of doing that, both legal and illegal. Like for instance, an exchange can get in trouble if they favor orders of certain clients over others while filling a book in the trades. That's illegal, right? But it happens, and it's also one protocol, right? It's like, oh, so it's not only highest bidder, it's also like my friend or like my best client, right? So that's already a different protocol. So it's just like
But I think
playing with that.
I think there's a difference though, because there's one thing to have a central planner to add those trips and wires. There's lots of books on this kind of stuff, but there's one thing to have a planning, a central planner or a group of technocrats who are designing the system. It's a whole other thing to have market forces competing against that design and forcing their own dominance over the system because of basically their net worth or their power. Like what is it that because I know we live in a world that consists of protocols and consists of many different design applications to the simple supply and demand function. We don't live in that world. We live in a world of design and structure. But how far are you going when you're discussing this, like, in terms of the political economy of this? Like, is it going to be, all of this can be designed in an optimal way, but then it's taken over by some technocrat, some guy who designs it his way? Like,
You want to answer that actually, or should I comment to it?
Yeah.
how different is it from the current world we live in? Because the current world we live in has all these things you're saying, to an extent.
It's a question of different order.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different question what you're asking.
Yeah, I think there were like two questions there. One was pointing to the importance of the bridge, that kind of, and the other one was that, but I didn't understand the technocrat part.
So
I think I understand the technocrat part. Can I chime in?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, this is something that I think about when I engage with the work that X is doing, is the risk that it seems to pose of having someone like an elite code wizard or financial expert, or our own version of that would potentially have power that overshadows that of other people in the network. And I think that this a question of agency and the distribution of agency, which is something that we think a lot about in economic space agency. To me, it seems like the only way to not have too much control handed over to something like capital, or the puppets behind capital, is to allow for to design the protocol in such a way that it's constantly open to revision, and so that more people can have agency and have a say in the creation of new protocols and new ways of redesigning and updating and forking and fixing and improving these protocols. And to be able to have an interface that handles that, not just through the expertise required to know how to program it, but to have something like an accessible interface where, in the same way that in capitalism we use our money to shape the future by spending certain things, consuming and investing, to be able to have a similar connection to the power to shape the future through money, but not have it mediated directly by just the sheer quantity of money and the wealth that you have, but instead have a different relationship to this power to shape the future.
Yeah. So that's the key, Daniel. The fact that these protocols, we understand them as social contracts, and they should be legible and transparent and modifiable. And that's what we mean by economic space agency, as you say, right? And why we say this is a grammar, it's a language, it's a protocol. So basically, it's not that it's imposed from the current powers that be. So on, you play by these rules, and this is the network state. All this wealth is already distributed, and when you enter the game, you enter with this state. But basically, you can not only create new grammars, but also new networks with different starting points. And then actually often says like the competition will occur in which network is the one that treats better to its participants. Because in networks, adoption is power. In the network, you cannot force people to participate. People participate voluntarily. That is an attribute of computational networks. So basically, you in the past, like in the protocol, capitalism as a protocol is like because it's being made a self-evidency and it's legally also like institutionalized. That is the network you enter. You have to. There's an alternative. What we want to create is an outside. Now to the question of like which political stance are we going to take in order to like be different from? Well, it's a meta stance. It's like we are not the ones to decide which utilities and which forms of measurement. It will be up to different people to define what that is. But what we want to give is the language to do that. And that is our political posture. That it is not up to us. But what is up to us is to call out capitalism as a protocol and sort of create the infrastructure in which others are going to be able to then take specific postures of how to value and what to value. Yeah, us included, yeah, of course, but not as the sole determiners of that. And that's also very well articulated in the book.
Yeah, that's really well said, Jorge. I think that, and Daniel, you kind of we're already arriving to the kind of one of our core theses too, is that when economy is becoming programmable like this, then actually where does the competitive edge or the value creation layer, where does it move? And it is really to creating these different kind of economic spaces which are hopefully as good as they can be for the participants, and that's where people will go. But that's what we are seeing happening, that people will go there where they want to belong, to those purposes, to those utilities where they want to be involved and rewarded and participate. And if they don't like it, they will go elsewhere. That's exactly what's becoming possible. Yes. Anyway, hey, we've gone already past the hour. Shall we, Unai, call it? Or I think Jorge's last statement was a really good conclusion too.
I am enjoying myself here. I don't know others. I can stay longer.
I'm happy if you want to finalize it, like instead of, you want to continue to finish the document.
Actually,
Well,
I think,
I think
there's one
If
point.
you may have.
If there's one point that also speaks to Leanne's question, is the interfacing. So
yes. Okay.
I think that's
Let's
important.
finalize that. Yes. Let's not forget that. So do you wanna? Should we read, or do you have that summarized in your mind already?
Again, I even though we are sort of like sharing where these documents coming from in a way that almost doesn't sound as what's written, I really encourage everyone to read it because it's very clearly captured in here. So, but it's not giving many examples or where things are coming from.
Oh, the references are not there. Yes.
We wanted to make it a compact pre-read, but it's valuable to read. There's many things that we're not saying that are in the text that will give more.
But let's just talk about the bridge or the need for this interface then a little bit. Like, why is it necessary? Why do we need it?
If we're going to what I can say, if we're going to create like multiple calculations, then there has to be a way of like bringing them together, and it speaks to the question of universality, but also if we understand protocols as social contracts, you could have basic interoperability through market-like interfaces, for instance. And in fact, as we propose in the economic space protocol, as described in the protocol for capital expression, there's a market with that for distributed transactions and distributed credit on these kind of things, right? So because there's already, as it is, there's a lot of elegance. The question is like who is controlling the protocol and what is the predominant value form of the protocol that takes the value in position, right? But if it's a network and everyone has equal status, it changes drastically, right? So we propose this as a base interoperability protocol, like a market-like unit of exchange defined by the network, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think I can go. That's a series of thought on its own, but just to say that markets can be protocols and they don't have to be capitalist markets. Can be post-capitalist markets, just by virtue of how the assets are created and put into exchange. But also at the same time, what we're defining in this language is a means of composing. So for instance, it's entirely possible that if you have green energy and green housing and green transport, you can have another meta utility that builds on those that is called green infrastructure. And the inputs are those, like housing credits, energy credits, transport credits. But at the higher order, there's another way of valuing those things that then you have just green infrastructure credits and they are accessible. They become sort of like the money of these different utilities. And the modes of commensuration is not markets, but it's just like greenness, right? Like you can measure the different initiatives in terms of ecological impact, both housing, transport, and production. So you can have multiple modes of commensuration that measure different things. You don't need to collapse everything, and that can inform your utility function. And the utility function would be like a meta utility function that then would prioritize different things, right? So it's not the central planning per se, although there's a sort of like a way of articulating it that has a hierarchical dimension, but also a horizontal dimension. One of the reasons markets work is because they're distributed networks. So the what we want to say is like markets are not the only distributed protocols that are there. So it's not markets versus central planning, right? They are both kinds of protocols. They are good for certain situations, each one on their own. But why markets succeed is because they don't need centralized control. So we want to sort of call out that the networking discourse and the distributed computation discourse, distributed algorithm discourse opens is these different ways through protocols of managing complex systems. Right? So interoperability and composition are like related to each other. So the last part of the interoperability, I would say, is like addressing the need to translate across systems inclusive with capital. And that again, that's really could be a conversation or a session in its own right. But instead of trying to create an alternative, some sort of commune, we're saying, hey, so value flows according to protocols. If we want to value flow across capital without capital forcing the collapse, then we need to create a protocol that preserves the integrity of this accounting system, but also the integrity of capital, because the capital has its own integrity. So this calls to like the network liquidity medium. There's a paper wrote about that, which is about, and I think I shared it with Julian. It's about translating from capital to utility in a way that capital will keep doing what capital is going to do. It's going to value the post-capitalist network in terms of capital. You cannot change that, right? Like valuation is always relative, but how is it that you do it? So from post-capitalist, actually, the post-capital can value capital relative to its utility in the network.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. I didn't see it if you shared it with me, and that might be because I have too many emails. But if you can share that again,
Yeah, I can
what
forward.
what I would love to see, because
Mhm.
I've read this kind of stuff so many times, and I'm always excited about it because I like the way you're writing this, and I like the vision. However, I don't really know if your vision is the same as my vision, and there's this inability to get concrete. And I would really love it if there was an example where you specifically, as if you're writing an agent-based model, and maybe you write the agent-based model, I don't know, but as if you specifically give an example of specifically, okay, we have a little economy. It has this kind of token system. It has this kind of thing. It has that. And I know you're getting specific and you want to remain general, but I want you to be specific so that I know that we're overlapping in our understanding as opposed to remaining in all these kind of very general theoretical, which I love. I don't say I don't love it. I love it, but
That's very challenging, Lian. Actually, like, and it's going to come because most of the people that engage don't engage. Like, if I could engage with you at the level of agent-based modeling and protocols, but that's not the biggest part of the constitution. But for instance, what I can give you is this network liquidity protocol. It is a protocol, and it's the link that I just sent you again. It's a formal a formalization, it's a specification. It has math, formulas, all these things, and if you read it and you know accounting, you will be able to implement it.
oh,
So,
okay, good. Where did you send that link to? Is that on Discord or
no,
where
in
is it?
just your email,
My email.
the email that you have for
Oh,
email. That is a very concrete example, but this is just one little instantiation of that grammar,
yeah.
right? So it's a discursive challenge because it's like bridging economics, and you know the problems with economics as a discourse,
Yeah.
and computation,
Mm.
right? And they are so far with each other, and the politics really enter through the economic lens.
Yes.
Right, so that's why there's so much discourse in here. It's like the political awareness, but the computation is sort of like reaching towards the computation. It's the most complicated part, and that the only way that can happen is by. I mean, we've been working on this in years, but being really involved, because we put those like technical specifications in the past before. No one reads them. Get it?
Well,
They don't get it.
it's not
Yeah.
no. Well, maybe nobody reads it, but I want to read it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I
So
there you go. I
so
love
the
for you to
basically
read that one.
the point is kind of we wrote this paper specifically just to kind of on this level of abstraction to kind of find resonance now in this collaborative finance audience a little bit, kind of like where we are, and kind of but then even if we're not saying it, there are like the specifications of everything that we are talking about here.
Exactly. Like I know,
and that's where we are going.
Yeah, that's where I want.
Yeah.
Because I know it's there, but I don't see it. So that's what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
I
It's
know
not here
so
in
I
this
know
paper.
you can do it. Yeah, it's not there in that paper, but yeah,
Yes.
where is it?
Just-
I still don't have that link,
We
so
have
I don't
it.
know what email you're sending it to.
Lian.Usher. Hold on. It is lusher@bard.edu. LUSSHER.
Lusha at where?
Bard, BARD.
Oh, at my bot email. Okay, right. EDU.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I did just look there, but hold on. Let me. If it's not there, I'll contact you.
We
I gotta
can
get
we
back
can
to it.
we can also share this with everybody who's interested, and we will be
Yeah.
sharing this very soon.
I can put it
More
in
generally.
the Discord if you guys, if anyone else is interested.
Yeah, please.
Oh yeah, it's in my like junk box or something. Okay, I have it.
But this is an example that I've been using with the models to get them to understand, help me write these things. So capitalism is like a web page. We're creating HTML for economy. Right?
Yeah,
So
right.
it's not that this is the page that we should use, or this is the plug. No, it's like this is a programming language that we're saying would unlock a new internet, the economic internet.
Yeah, and just give a little example, like be
Yes.
like.
We're getting there,
But
Leon. We're getting
Okay.
there, but it's hard.
Okay.
It's hard.
It's hard. I
We-
know
we-
it's hard.
No, but we also have it. Everyone wants a different example. Like if I give you an energy grid, and it's just so it's only physical, and
Yeah.
then someone wants like like about the arts and the act, and you give it that, and someone reads it that it's not into that. It's like sounds just like hooky pokey. As like it's so hard to speak of a language, So it's a language. It's an economic.
Well,
language.
just give
But we
one. I
will
don't
come up
care
with all the
if
examples.
it's an electronic
We
grid.
will.
It's okay. Whatever it is. Just
Yeah, electricity grid. It's what I
We
was
can do
talking
that.
about today.
okay.
Yeah. Those are coming
Thank
too.
you.
Anyway, hey, now I really seriously have to go now.
Yeah.
But if you want to continue, my pleasure.
No, I should
thanks
go
for
as well.
setting this up. Thanks for setting this up, and please share the recording with me too, so we can share it in our circles. It's really nice to meet you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
See you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.